Opposition parties in KwaZulu-Natal are criticizing the provincial government's plans to close almost 1,000 schools. This comes after KwaZulu-Natal Premier Dube told members of the Legislature that government plans to close close to 1,000 non-viable schools. We discussed this further with Imraan, Keeka, a member of Legislature. The party is against the move. Thank you very much, Mr. Keeka, for your time this afternoon. Let's start with this concept of non-viable schools. What does that mean?
Hi, Gugu. Sorry, before jumping into it, greetings to you and to your viewers. In terms of the regulations promulgated by the Department of Basic Education nationally, the minimum norm is that in public schools, in primary schools in particular, if there are less than 135 learners, and in secondary schools, if there's less than 200 learners, then these schools are considered non-viable and should be closed. KwaZulu-Natal has taken a slightly different approach to this, in that KwaZulu-Natal is saying that in primary schools, if there are less than 50 learners, those schools should be closed, and if there are less than 100 learners, then those should also be closed. Now, there's a little bit of history to all of this. If you go back, you'll remember when we say in politics a week is a long time. If you go back, you'll see that initially school closures was something that was started in the Western Cape, where the ANC took the DA-led government to court to try and stop them and lost. So school closures is nothing new. The concept is nothing new. And in fact, in some instances, it is a very necessary evil, if I can put it that way. Because in KwaZulu-Natal, I have visited schools where there were only 2 learners. Schools like that definitely need to be closed. The issue that we have is that the plan that was presented by the Premier in the format that it was presented was something that we are not happy with. In fact, in the manner in which it has been presented, I've called her the illusionist in chief, because all she's doing is presenting an illusion rather than reality in terms of what needs to happen.
And so we do understand that there is, in fact, the schooling system document, or the KwaZulu-Natal Transformation Schooling System document, that was compiled some 10 years ago when the now Water and Sanitation Minister Senzo Mchunu was the Education MEC of that province. What has changed between then and now, where that document is concerned?
Well, nothing much has changed, and as we said yesterday, that all that will happen is probably a few of those things that the Premier tabled as part of her report will actually happen. Number one, maybe a project or 2 may linger on, and eventually her term of office will come to an end. Hopefully the term of office of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal will come to an end soon, and nothing will actually happen. Whilst the necessity and understanding of the need for some of these schools to close, it has to happen on a school by school or an individual basis. There has to be consideration of the circumstances of each of these schools. It is for this reason that the Western Cape government, for example, has placed a moratorium, breaking away from the national norm, on the closure of all schools temporarily to evaluate which ones need to be closed urgently. The benefit of closing some of these schools would be that you would reduce costs and increase the kitty of the department. So that's one benefit. The other problem that exists in KwaZulu-Natal is that the department says that in those schools that it will close, it will transport those learners from where they are to schools that are nearby, that will make it easier to increase those numbers and also increase the dependency on these small and non-viable schools. The problem with this is that in KwaZulu-Natal, the Department of Transport is the provider for the transport of learners, number one. And number two, the budget for transport in KwaZulu-Natal has been slashed by the Department of Education in almost half. In fact, in a question that I asked directly to an official in the last portfolio committee meeting of the education portfolio, I asked a very simple question, that in the next 5 months, will the Department of Education be able to fund learner transport? And the simple answer was that it will not be able to do so. In other words, in the next 5 months, transport provided for learners in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, if there is no treasury bailout, will fall on its face. In other words, part of the plan to transport learners from those non-viable schools that are closed down to other schools, not going to happen. There just simply isn't money to do. So whilst the concept is understood and while the need is there, we call the Premier this illusionist in chief because there is absolutely no budget allocated for this entire process to roll out. That's one of the big problems. The other thing is that she says that some of these buildings will be handed over to other departments to use for other purposes, such as the Department of Higher Education, for example. The problem with this is that the MEC for Education in KwaZulu-Natal, Mbali Fraser, has signed a response to a parliamentary question which I put to her to ask her about the maintenance of those small and non-viable schools. And she confirmed that not 1 cent is currently being spent on any of those schools. So if those buildings are going to be handed over, in what condition will they be? That is something to answer. And also, the schools that have already been closed have become ugly, unholy, and very unsavory places for the communities to have to deal with. They've been stripped bare. Just the brick walls are standing there. They've become denizens for drug lords. They've become places of crime and, just simply a sore eye in the public space. And these are the perils and things that we've put forward on the table that actually require to be addressed, from learner transport and many other things. The Premier also went on to say, for example...
Mr. Keeka, I do beg your pardon, if you will please allow me to join you for the purpose of time. What then are you proposing as a solution if you're saying there is no budget, it's simply not feasible because, like you mentioned, there are schools that are not viable?
A moratorium on the closure of schools, so they should be halted for now, so that the process is properly thought through, that the ideas that the Premier is putting on the table, funding for it is found, and that the process moving forward is one that involves public participation, both with the communities, the learner community, the parent community, and the communities at large. And this must include the Induna and the Amakosi in the area, where these schools, in fact, the 255 schools that are envisaged to be closed in this financial year.
Mr. Keeka, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.